So as you heard, I'm going to start us off just by talking a bit about why we're all here together. I'll give a brief overview of the childcare landscape in Nova Scotia and a very brief history of what brought us to the point that we're at today. So the general problem that we have in Nova Scotia that you've heard many of us talk about before is that we continue to have a market-based approach to childcare. So overall, we need to shift to viewing childcare as a public service. And this market-based approach we have leads us to three key challenges. Again, three things that you've heard many of us talk about before. The first is wages, the second is fees, and the third is spaces. And I would just add that overarching all of these is a general lack of evidence-based policymaking that we have in the province. So in terms of wages, we know from Sonia and Frank's research that in 2012, Nova Scotia early childhood educators had the lowest wages in the country. Since then, provincial funding was introduced in 2016 to increase wages to between $15 and $19 per hour, depending on level of training. The median wage for ECEs in Canada is $19.20 an hour, but in Nova Scotia, it's only $17, and that's as of December 2020. Just for a bit of perspective, the living wage in Halifax is $21.80 per hour. So the median wage of $17 is far below that goal. We also know there's a lack of benefits, including pensions, paid sick days, and health benefits for early childhood educators. All of this leads to major recruitment and retention issues. And all of it as well demonstrates a systemic undervaluing of women's care work. There are currently consultations around a wage grid for Nova Scotia, and I think childcare now could play a key coordinating role moving forward in that conversation. So it's very timely that we are here together today. The second challenge is around fees. Median parent fees for licensed childcare 50% are above the median. Again, from the CCPA Nova Scotia living wage work, we know they aren't much different in rural areas as well. Again, for some comparison, I teach at Mount St. Vincent University. The tuition fees this year at the Mount were $715 per month, right? So less than childcare fees. And we also know that tuition fees are unacceptably high. So that tells us a lot, I think. The median cost for a school age spot is $26 per day for those children ages 5 to 12 during the school year. And of course, there's summer care that's also a challenge for parents. In 2019, the median monthly cost for all age groups, for comparison's sake, in other provinces, in Quebec was only $200, and the median monthly preschool fees in Manitoba were $451 and $586 in Prince Edward Island. And we'll hear more about this from Sharon, but British Columbia is rolling out a $10 a day childcare plan. Subsidies do cover a portion of the costs of childcare in Nova Scotia, but these are targeted only to those who meet very restrictive criteria. And we know that subsidies don't guarantee that licensed spaces will be available. This brings me to my third and final challenge, which is, of course, spaces. Only about 30% of families in Nova Scotia have access to licensed care. There are long waiting lists. Parents rely on informal care when that may not be their preference. There's a lack of spaces, an acute lack of spaces in rural communities, and a lack of infant care. And these gaps have been made even more evident during the pandemic. So I'll just conclude with a few final notes that I think will set us up for our conversation today. And that, I guess, one of the other main attempts in the past to bring this kind of group together. This meeting is a result of these ongoing efforts and was facilitated by two key developments. The first was the support of the Nova Scotia Federation of Labor and Labor Partners, and the second was support by the National Office of Childcare Now. Some of us have been on this journey for a while, and others are joining us for the first time today. I'm excited that we get to spend this time together talking about how we can collectively work to achieve a universal, comprehensive, publicly funded, high quality, affordable, accessible, accountable, and nonprofit childcare system in Nova Scotia.
Thanks, Tammy. Next, we're going to hear from Rhonda Doyle-LeBlanc.
Hi, everyone. It is my pleasure today to introduce Morna Ballantyne. She's the Executive Director of Childcare Now, Canada's national childcare advocacy organization. She began advocating for more high quality and affordable licensed childcare more than 30 years ago as a mother of 2 young children. Now a grandmother of 4-year-old and infant twins, she continues to work with others to press all levels of government to build a publicly managed and publicly funded childcare system for the benefit of children, parents, and those who work in childcare. A system that will contribute to greater economic security and economic growth for all in Canada. Morna serves on the federal government's expert panel on early learning and childcare data and research, and on the Government of Canada's Task Force on Women in the Economy. So join me in welcoming Morna.
Thank you so much. It's Rhonda, good to see you again. Nice to see so many people I've known, and also so many I don't know. I'm just first of all want to say thank you to Little Bear and also to Tracy for very important and moving openings and recognition of the time we're in. And Tracy, I really appreciated that this is a huge moment for our country, both with respect to truth and reconciliation and early learning and childcare. And I really think the two go hand in hand. So thank you for making that connection. So how exciting to be at the inaugural meeting of Childcare Now, Nova Scotia. It has taken a while to get here, and huge congratulations to all of you who are involved in bringing this together now for many, many months, including during a pandemic. So thank you for that. And, you know, this really is the time. So it is exciting. I put together a few slides that I'm going to share, and I usually just speak. Now, can you see my presentations as you move forward and doing the advocacy work that we're going to talk about this afternoon? I thought, you know, because not everybody going on then across the country. And delegates said, we really need to get organized to take on this issue in a big way. And that was the founding of Childcare Now, which at that time was founded as the organization was the Daycare, Canada's Daycare Advocacy Association, then became the Childcare Advocacy Association of Canada. And then after the 2015 election, we decided to rebrand as Childcare Now. And as you can see, it shows that our patience was wearing thin. It's time after the 2015 election, we said, no, it's time for Childcare Now. And so we rebranded under that slogan. Our organization includes members, people who have signed up and pay an annual membership fee. We are now starting to put into place chapters, provincial chapters. We have one. Yours is the third provincial chapter that has been created in the last few months. We now have a Childcare Now chapter in Alberta and a Childcare Now chapter in Saskatchewan. And our plan over the next months is to either work to put in chapters, formal chapters, or networks, childcare advocacy networks in every province and in every territory. We also, of course, work closely with partner organizations, and Sharon Gregson, who you're going to hear from with the BC Advocates, that's one of our provincial partner organization. We also have a partner organization in Ontario, an Ontario Coalition for Better Childcare, and we have a partner organization in Manitoba. So as you can see, between the chapters and our organizations, we are organizing across the country. And then, of course, we have a lot of supporters who are not necessarily members, but show and express their support for childcare advocacy and engage in a number of ways. And we have a lot of strategic allies. So we are what we refer to ourselves as a large umbrella organization across the country. And right from the start, what we have been advocating for is a comprehensive universal childcare system across Canada. And by universal, what we mean is that childcare should be affordable, accessible, inclusive, and it should be high quality to all who want it and who need it. And it should be open for children from infant, from birth, right up to age 12. We counterpose a universal childcare system with a social welfare program. For many years, childcare was seen as a form of welfare. We do not believe that it should be considered a welfare program. It should be considered a universal program. And one of the main reasons for that is that everybody knows that programs for the poor make poor programs. And it's only by advocating for a universal program that we can actually achieve a program that is truly high quality in all respects. We learned over the years from evidence internationally and also in Canada that in order to achieve universality and high quality with respect to childcare, we have to replace the current market-based approach to the provision of childcare with a public system of early learning and childcare. And as Tammy said, that's a system that's publicly funded, publicly planned, publicly managed, and publicly regulated. And also we want to see early childhood education and care as an entitlement, much like public education is, elementary and secondary school education, but not compulsory. And that requires big system change. The federal budget, it was announced on April 19th, 2021, is an opportunity to make the system change we need across Canada. So just to remind you that that federal budget allocates $30 billion of new federal funding over the next 5 years to build a system of early learning and childcare. And the money will carry on beyond 5 years. We're guaranteed, according to the budget, a minimum of $9.2 billion annually. This is federal money after 5 years. I say minimum because the federal budget also leaves open that if, as the building of the system begins and develops, there's a need for more federal money, the federal budget leaves an opening for more money to be allocated in the future. And this federal funds is going to be distributed, and how it is spent is going to be decided on through bilateral agreements that the federal government reaches with each province and with each territory. So in advance of the federal budget, childcare advocates said the economic recovery coming out of the pandemic would not happen without quality, accessible, affordable, inclusive, and culturally safe childcare, and that wasn't going to be able to happen without system change. What we said was that the government, federal government and provincial governments would have to work together and make change on 3 fronts simultaneously. It'd have to address quality, and that would include developing and putting in place a workforce strategy. They had to work on affordability, and that meant bringing parent fees down. And at the same time, had to work and expanding licensed childcare to make it more accessible. And all of these things would have to be supported through public funding of operation, funding the services, the operational services, and also that there needed to be public funding for capital expansion. So this is what we said before the budget, and we worked hard for it. We wrote letters, we signed petitions, we got other partners to join in. And soon before the budget, as you know, there was a growing outcry, even from business, that the federal government would have to move to do something about the childcare crisis in Canada. Now, the federal budget sets some specific goals. First of all, and really importantly, it says that the Indigenous Early Learning and Childcare Framework Agreement that was arrived at in 2018 between the Government of Canada and Indigenous governments would be implemented. A second goal was that parent fees would be reduced by half by the end of 2022, if not before, and brought down to an average of $10 a day by 25-26. There would also, the budget said that there would be growth in licensed quality affordable spaces. There'd be more before and after school care, that expansion would be not-for-profit, and that workforce problems would have to be addressed, including low wages. And also they set the goal of collecting data and measuring progress. And it's in this respect that there was also a recognition that as data is collected, progress is measured, more money would be provided based on those results. So in order to implement this Canada-wide system, what we've been saying is that what's absolutely essential is that licensed childcare services be funded directly and no longer reliant on parent fees. And that the level of operational funding for licensed services has to be sufficient to ensure that parent fees can be low and affordable, while at the same time ensuring that the services are high quality, inclusive, and culturally safe. Because quality requires, we know this from all the evidence, highly qualified and properly compensated early childhood educators. And we know that proper compensation will never be able to be paid as long as services are financed by parent fees and not through the public. Also, we know, and this especially came apparent through the pandemic, that programs that are dependent on parent fees are inevitably very precarious. The result of the reliance on parent fees, we've seen a devastation of the provision of licensed early learning and childcare services in most parts of the country. We also know that for expansion, to have more of it, we need capital funding, but we also need for expansion to be planned, and we have to have it publicly managed, and expansion has to be kept public. So that means that we're advocating that all expansion has to be in the public and not-for-profit sectors. And further and connected to that, that any publicly funded capital expansion that produces assets, childcare assets, those assets have to be publicly owned. So essentially, this means an end to expansion through grants, application system, and this is fundamental to changing the market system. One of the fundamental characteristics of the market approach to childcare in Canada is that governments are not creating childcare. We talk about creating spaces, they don't create spaces. The way childcare is created is that individuals or organizations, either for profit or not for profit, essentially set up shop and sell their services. And parents buy those services. So we don't have a publicly funded, publicly managed system, and that's what we have. I want to just spell out, this is the policy direction that we think we need to move in. So what do we have to do to get there? Well, first of all, we're going to have to pressure the federal and provincial governments to do the right thing at the same time. Because we're moving into bilateral negotiations where provinces and the federal government are sitting down one by one to negotiate bilateral agreements, we have to influence the outcome of those agreements. And we're going to have to be extremely strategic. I know some of you in the call know a lot about labor negotiations and bargaining. And you know really well that if one agreement is signed that is poor, that sets a really low bar for everybody else. If you sign an agreement and a first agreement that is really good, that sets the bar high for everybody else. So what we're pushing the federal government to do is work with provincial governments that we think and hope to set the bar high with respect to bilateral agreements. And of course, the federal government is also identifying willing dancing partners, if you will, on the provincial side. And I can tell you that Nova Scotia may be among the top, or it may be close to the top. And keep in mind, of course, that's all relative to who else is in the provincial landscape. All right? So you look at the provincial landscape and you think about who might set the bar high and who is likely to try to set the bar really low. Nova Scotia might not be at the top of the list, but it's not at the bottom either. One of the things we're going to have to do is federally and provincially stick to the same message. And that speaks to some of the messages that I just shared with you. We want to be clear that we don't play off issues of affordability against the challenges of accessibility and expansion, against the issues of quality and particularly wages. This is, these have been played off against each other for too long. So what we need to continue to say, key message, is that the governments in these bilateral agreements have to address simultaneously affordability, quality, and accessibility. And that, again, key to that is to directly publicly fund the operation of services, to no longer depend on parent fees, even through parent fee subsidies, that the public money should go directly towards funding the operation of services. So this is what I mean when I say third thing is we have to know exactly what system change we want and how it can be achieved. And by how it can be achieved, I mean, what would the first steps be in Nova Scotia to move towards a fully publicly funded system? What would the first steps be to bringing down the parent fees? What would the first steps be towards expansion? Where does the expansion have to happen? Which are the populations and the communities that are underserviced? This is the system change. We have to know what we want and know how to get it. Really importantly, fourthly, we have to organize. We have to convince those who are not already convinced of the system change we want. There are large numbers of people, more people now in 2021 than there were even in 2019, who understand how important childcare is. But they're not all convinced on the same solutions. We have to convince them of our solutions. And we're going to then, when we convince new people, recruit them to join our coalition. And then those who are convinced and organized, we have to mobilize, convince the convinced to act. And to do that, the coalition, and that's Childcare Now Nova Scotia, working with other organizations, your strategic partners, supporters, allies, to lead and coordinate. So that's the pitch I make to you as you launch Childcare Now Nova Scotia, and I welcome any questions or discussion, and I know it's going to be lots of opportunity for that. as the afternoon progresses. Thanks very much.